won't do that.
Oh, thanks.
No, we won't do that. You guys don't look. You guys look great, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we just went live, we opened up the door, and we're just going to chat for a little bit while we're waiting for everyone to get in. We've got about 18 people in the room, and if you are on, can you please help us out by clicking the share button? It's underneath our videos boxes, and it's right next to the email button. Just share it out. Let everyone know we're getting started here. And I'm just chatting here with Neil and Mark. And there's a couple questions from in the chat. Let's see. So Mustafa was asking, are there any IT working for Enco, like working group developer script? If anyone is in the room who does that, please respond. He's also asking, what do you plan to do for Enco and how can we help? Interesting.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, so I think we'll get into some of that towards the presentation.
Exactly.
Cool.
He'll get an idea of, in the presentation, he'll give an idea of what we're doing now. And probably then a pretty good idea of where we're going. And I think Neil sort of touches upon the near future towards the end. So, and then if he has any further questions after that, that'd be great. You know, we hope to answer them.
Great. Got more people filing in. Thanks, guys, for sharing this out. So can you just, if you can't see me, I mean, if you can't hear us, can you please let us know? Because we're just talking here and it'd be kind of funny, like, oh, I can't hear anything. But yeah, let us know if you can hear us. All right. Also, I was wondering if there's anyone who designs typefaces or designs type in general in the room. Let us know in the chat too, as we're waiting to get started here.
Yeah, that would be us.
Okay. So we got two so far. That's good. Russell McGorm designs typefaces. Russell, where are you from? Let us know where you're from. And then Victoria, can you remind me where you're from? Russell's from Toronto. Very cool. And then where are you guys today? You too. Neil and
awesome.
yeah, that's good.
We're in Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
Portland, Maine. That's really good.
Yes, the first Portland.
First Portland. Oh yeah.
Don't confuse it with that other one.
I see. Okay, so very cool. So Hrant is a self-unemployed type designer.
Isn't that like every type designer?
And Victoria, thank you for reminding me you're from Portugal. And Bernardo, are you designing type, Bernardo? I know you're from Philly. Very cool. So what is behind you guys? I see on the wall some type.
Oh, a bunch of proofs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always have a bunch of proofs on the wall because looking at them takes some time. It's not the kind of thing you want lying around on the desk because there's no room. But also, it's always good to have them on the wall, and you walk by them, and sometimes you can, pour through them within a short period of time. Other times you may have to go by in a couple, 4 or 5 or 6 times in the course of a week. And it's just good that it's there. Every time you're over in that part of the room, you can take a look at them and make some notes on them, because you can't see everything all at once. That's the truth of it, is when you look at a compliment, you can't see everything all at once. And so you go back and you pick away at it visually and make notes as you go along.
And I think the vast majority of those proofs, those are the vast majority of that stuff up there is from the project we're talking about today. So. Oh,
very cool. Very cool. Well, let's see. Victoria's from Portugal. I know Jason is here. He designs type and he's in Cupertino. David is in Stockholm, Sweden. I use type, but I don't design. The same with me. I'm also a typographer. I use type, but I don't design. Oh, Jason says he's self-employed as well. Probably not for the same reasons. Okay, so it's 1 right after the hour as we're waiting for people to come in. Just want to remind you all that I am Rachel Elnar, the host of your Type Ed Typography Dojo today. And I'm in Los Angeles. Today I'm joined by Mark and Neil, and they are in Portland, Maine, the very first Portland. Okay, and they are the amazing duo who designs typefaces designs type systems actually for underserved communities. So welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got your start?
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
Let's see. I've been at this for, I think, a pretty long time. It's been over 30 years that I've been designing type. For most of that time, I designed almost exclusively Latin scripts. So, in other words, the alphabet that we use for English and other Western European languages. It wasn't until, this will be a long story short, but it wasn't until I took on the task of designing a typeface family that included the Cherokee syllabary in it a few years back. It was 2011, that I really I became very much attracted to designing non-Latin scripts, because suddenly this whole new world opened up to me. And what I learned in designing that complement, that family, was just really uplifting. It was just amazing. It was an experience I hadn't had in type design yet. So it just became, non-Latin scripts became a very attractive thing to me, from what you learn and also how meaningful it is. When you design a Latin script, you're designing for a very large pool of other available typefaces. When you design non-Latin typefaces, you can, the pools are of different sizes depending on which script you're working on. And if it's a very small pool, then what you design, if you do it as competently and as conscientiously as possible, can make quite a difference within a specific language community. So that was also, the meaningfulness of the whole thing was also very attractive. That's how I got into non-Latin type design.
That's very interesting, actually. Jason also says that he designed a Cherokee font once too. How do you come upon designing a Cherokee font or typeface? That
started in, the impetus for that was at TypeCon in 2011 in New Orleans. One of the presentations was given by 3 guys from the Language Technology Office of the Cherokee Nation. And they basically told the story of how they lobbied Apple to insert a soft keyboard in the iPhone for Cherokee, and what effect that had on community in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And they sort of ended their presentation with a plea to everyone in the room, all the type designers in the room, saying, we need fonts. You have this huge visual wealth this wealth of visual culture that comes from a diversity in typefaces that we have to catch up to. We don't have that yet. So we ask you to design fonts for us. And I heard that. I sat there and heard that. And I just thought immediately, I'd been thinking about doing something similar to that up until then. And when I heard that, I just thought, this is it. I have to do this. And that's how I got started.
Interesting. Cool. Okay, Neil?
Yeah, mine's a lot more convoluted.
It's crazy.
I spent, prior to getting into this, I actually spent 10 years, I was a process engineer for semiconductor manufacturing. I actually worked on what they call photolithography, which is it's really the process of imaging all the circuit patterns onto the circuit at submicron levels and stuff. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I quit and I decided to change things up. And so I just kind of just started teaching myself type design here. And did that for a few years, and then kind of met Mark, and then I was helping him out with kind of the tail end of his Cherokee work. I was helping him expand some of the character sets and stuff. And so then I kind of got, we started working together, and it was working really well. And we got into the whole idea of doing more of these non-Latin scripts. And then that's when we kind of formed JamraPatel and started like putting that as kind of a focus of what we work on.
Great. Okay. All right. So we have, yeah, in a nutshell. So I just want to remind the group that if you have any questions, please put them underneath. There's a tab called Questions and Topics. If you can add them in there, then Mark and Neil can answer them afterwards. So guys, I'm just going to open up your presentation, and we'll get started.
And there we
Okay,
are.
here we are. So let's
Can we
go ahead.
start? Okay,
Let's do
good.
it.
So I'll start. This is, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories today. And one of the, most of them have to do with what Neil and I are doing nowadays. Fortunately, Neil and I are designing a large type system of coordinated scripts that covers a number of writing systems in use on the African continent, and designing them in different weights and wherever appropriate in italics. Now, ideally, then this will be a type system that can handle multilingual tasks, both in print and on screen, and in various languages and writing systems, and also provide various language communities with a typographic richness that is not necessarily available to them yet. So you're looking at some of the scripts that we have in development right now. And on the left, of course, the Latin script. To the right of that is Inco, which we're going to be hearing a little bit more about in depth today. To the right of that is what the tech world calls Ethiopic, but its actual name is Ge'ez. And it's a script that's commonly used in Ethiopia and Eritrea. And to the right then is Vi. And ... off to the very right is just an indication that there are a couple more scripts which are either in the research phase or they only exist in a rough first draft, which we'll be eventually be bringing into the mix. Let's take a little bit closer look at some of these. Now for the Latin, you see this is what we're developing here is not only just the standard Latin complement, but also a full complement of the Latin IPA. IPA, unfortunately, this doesn't refer to beer as much as I hoped, but rather it actually refers to the International Phonetics Alphabet. And this is actually an important writing system in Africa because it's used to transcribe hundreds of languages, which is why they need the phonetic characters. And you see a few of them here. And these are the same characters that you find in a dictionary to provide you with phonetic transcriptions of words. So we're still in the process of building this complement out. This is a closer look at the Ethiopic, which is clearly the oldest writing system that we're currently working on next to the Latin. It's approximately 2,000 to 4,000 years old, depending on which written history you're referring to. And a complement of Ethiopic comes in at around 528 glyphs. And you're seeing about 440 of them here. This also has a series of weights which we're developing so that it will work in tune visually with the rest of the family. And you can believe me that drawing all of this is really quite an experience. And this is just the first draft. Ethiopic or Ge'ez is what scholars refer to as beta or an alpha syllabary. That is, various glyphs in it can either represent a single sound, such as the letters of an alphabet, or they can also stand for a syllable in the way that glyphs do in a syllabary. These glyphs here are from the Vi syllabary, the writing system of the language of the Vi people of Liberia in West Africa. These are just a few of the glyphs. The entire complement comes in at about 212, and our design is still very much in development, but we're pretty confident about the direction that it's going in. So what I'm going to tell you about is how we designed a typeface family for the West African script Nko. And I'll do that in order to provide you with an idea of the strategies and considerations that go into designing non-Latin scripts, and particularly a system of this size. And then later on, Neil's going to tell you about some of the steps we're taking to introduce it into an emerging market. So as usual for this project, we begin with a lot of research through interlibrary loans, online, and at the Widener and Houghton libraries at Harvard, which is just a couple of hours down the road from where we are here in Portland. And do this in order to understand as much as we can about the languages, their scripts, the societies in which they're used, and the history of those societies. And we do this for two reasons. One, we want to have a solid basis as possible for making decisions in the design of typefaces. And two, it's just really fun to learn all this stuff. I mean, it's just great. It's what I was saying before. It's one of the great perks of on this kind of a task. It's like you're watching 24 hours of documentaries the whole time. You're just learning stuff constantly. Nko is an alphabet used for the Manding language in the dialects Bambara, Maninka, Mandinka, and Jula. These are part of the group of Mande languages in West Africa, which in turn is a branch of the Niger-Congo linguistic family. So I'll take a closer look at this. Here we have the second largest continent on Earth, and we'll zoom in here. And right now, Manding is spoken in Senegal, the Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Burkina Faso. This represents a language community of approximately 20 to 40 million people. And so for the and for the benefit, for my own benefit and for the benefit of our American attendees, I'm just going to lay the map of the continental United States over on top of that to get an idea of the geographic area that we're talking about here. Basically, it's equivalent to the Western United States, starting at the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains. Nko is a relatively new script, and it was invented by this gentleman here, Suleiman Kante, who's a trader and autodidact born in Guinea in 1922. And he invented it in order to provide a written form for Manding, which until that time was primarily oral. Kante's motivation for inventing it was the inability of the Latin and Arabic scripts to transcribe the complexity of Manding, which is understandable since Manding is a tonal language. For example, each Manding vowel can take on one of 16 variations in length and tone. You're looking at only 5 of them here, but it's enough to see where the Latin script falls miserably short of accurately transcribing Manding. On the right, you have Nko, and for each vowel, you have a diacritic or a tonal marker. In the middle, you see what that tonal marker is indicating, what's happening to that vowel. And then on the left, you see the Latin transcription, and it's all the same. It can't really handle the transcription of tonalities in a language. So Kante finished the development of Nko in February of 1949, and that's its birth date right there, 1949. Bear in mind, Kante was not just inventing a writing system, but also doing something else. And I'm beginning to recognize a distinct pattern of recurrence here the more I study non-Latin scripts invented by people under the pressure of foreign intruders or colonial rule. And that is this. Writing systems are often invented not only as a means of accurately mapping symbols to the sounds of a language, but also to stand as an icon of cultural identity. For Manding speakers, Nko has become an important part of their social identity. So colonial rule ended in 1958, Kante died in 1987, but literacy in Nko is rapidly expanding in West Africa, especially right now. Nko reads right to left with connected glyphs, so in that respect, it has those similarities to Arabic. But when we first looked at the script, we really didn't have a feeling for why it had the overall form character that it has. It was just so foreign to us. But looking at real cultural forms and patterns in everyday West Africa, we could at least speculate that this environment had some influence on Kante's decision-making when he was inventing the alphabet. It would seem to make sense that the shapes of glyphs could have had their forebears in something like what we see in this cloth from Senegal, or in this village in Burkina Faso. Now, of the few Nko fonts out there, they all pretty much look like this, which is a kind of graphical simplification of the script, or as I like to call it, a Futuraization. So if you're familiar with the typeface Futura, that's also a graphical simplification of the Latin script. It's made up of basic geometric forms, perfect circles and sticks and straight stems without any kind of ornamentation on them. But in handwriting, it looks like this, which we found far warmer and more personable. In fact, what you're looking at here is Suleiman Kante's handwriting. So designing our Nko we wanted to bring some of that humanity and warmth into it. We also wanted to get closer to the traditionally handwritten bold variant, which has a distinct contrast in stroke weight, the logic of which we could not figure out at first because it has absolutely no correlation to how thicks and thins are in the Latin alphabet. And we really didn't, it was so strange to us. And it wasn't until we did pen exercises in order to discover the construction of the encode forms that we could begin to speculate on why the thin and thick strokes were distributed the way they are. And yet we didn't want to get close to the equivalent of a script font like Snell Roundhand or a hand lettering imitation, because there were other things to be considered, like the technical and target considerations. For example, where would the typeface be used? In which environments and in which technology? We felt that communication technology was currently the more urgent application that needed support, because as is typical for many developing countries and economies, the mobile phone has become the primary motor of connectedness and business. Laptops or even printers are far from as prevalent as they are in Europe or the US, but mobile phones are everywhere, and the people who have them do everything on them. So that was to decide on a font weight strategy that would accommodate as many technical environments as possible, and also drew its inspiration from historical models when the weight was increased. That's why going from a monoweight light to a high contrast bold seemed practical. And the advantage of this with respect to screen displays is that the stroke contrast in the bolder weights keeps the glyph counters open. And this is really important in some of the scripts we're developing. The fact that this technical strategy also conforms to many historical models made it seem like the best way to go. So once we had our first draft finished, we went on a kind of internet journey to establish a connection to someone we can talk to within the language community and show proofs to and get feedback from. And because as you can imagine, it's critically important to have experts and critics within the language community in order to design type that's useful to them and respectful of their culture. But we really didn't know where to start. And how this all came to be involves maybe a dozen really amusing stories, but for expediency, I can sort of break this down to you pretty quickly. I had this thought. I have a friend of mine who travels to Senegal every year. And before he went on one of his trips, I stuffed a bunch of encode proofs in his hand. And I said, if you see any of this over there, take a picture of it. If it's on a building, if it's in a document or something, get a picture of it. And if you find anyone over there who can speak authoritatively to it, then have him get in touch with us. And ask him if he'd be willing to look at proofs or something like that. Well, he did that. And the gentleman he contacted got in touch with us, and he put us in touch with a guy at Boston University in the faculty.
Wow.
And he, in turn, connected us to the preceptor of the African Studies program at Harvard, a man named Boubacar Diakité, who's originally from Mali. And he was our first critic. He connected us to a guy in Cairo who was a former student of Suleiman Kante. And we were really happy about that connection because we felt, well, he would be the absolute authority on the correctness of the script. He, in turn, connected us with a guy in Conakry in Guinea, who connected us with a guy in New York City who teaches in Co and history, who connected us with another guy in Guinea. So this whole sort of like team came together, and this was our team of critics and authorities. And in the course of the project, we thought at first that this all happened haphazardly, but in the course of the project, we slowly came to realize that many of these people are actually at the core of the encode literacy movement in West Africa right now. They're the ones driving it. Their feedback was enthusiastic, it was definitive and thorough, and we were able to make our design as correct and as readable as possible. And when we submitted an italic to them, which had never before existed as type, they welcomed it. So this is the first encode italic typeface that you see in the bottom half of the screen. And in the end, what we have is the first multi-weight, multi-style encode typeface family. The task now is to get it out there, but selling fonts retail is really not in our plan. In fact, it's not even an option. But we like the way the typeface looks. For example, is a news website. This is rendered here with a standard system font, such as can be found in many operating systems. But if our, so this is how most people see it, but if our typeface were inside here, it would look like that. And which we sense is more open, more readable, a little more inviting, and a little more coordinated. Same true for this blog here. This is also, again, rendered in a system font. This is how most people are seeing it right now. But it's not looking too good. Some of these older system fonts haven't really kept up with the advances in technology. So you see in the headline up there, in the bold version, that's being kind of broken. You're seeing tonal markers over empty spaces. None of the letters are connecting or anything like that. It's not looking too good. But again, if our typeface family were in, it would look like this. This is really important because numerous studies show that many language communities in Africa are striving for education in their own language. Many countries only officially provide general education in the language remaining from the colonial era. And in West Africa, that would mostly be French. Also as important is the acceptance of the internet on a continental scale is also dependent upon the increase of online content in indigenous languages, of which there is still very, very little. The problem is that while Africa is considered an emerging market, large corporations are only tentatively inching their way in, some at a glacial rate, others cautiously making seed investments. And so with this fact in view, this is where we made the decision to try a little market building on our own, which I know it sounds kind of ridiculous and like a considerable amount of bravado, considering that Africa is gigantic and we're just two guys in Portland, Maine, but what else were we supposed to do? So we could at least try some things out and see what happens. So Neil's going to tell you now about some of those things that we tried out and what happened.
All right. So sorry, bore you with a little bit of charts here at the beginning, but this is kind of important though. This is kind of going back to something Mark was talking about the cell phone usage in West Africa. And this is some Pew Research data from 2014. What you can see is, they didn't get into every country in the region, but they got into a few. And what you can see though, it's pretty significant, right? Mobile penetration rates, they're in excess of 70%. That means like 70% or more of the population has access to cell phones or own cell phones. And so that's a pretty big, that's a large region, a lot of cell phones and a lot of people. And then they're not all smartphones. You can see it's kind of a smaller percentage, but it's growing, increasing because there's a lot of cell phones being made by Chinese manufacturers that are cheaper and getting more circulation. So that number is growing quite quickly. And here's another chart. This one's a little busy, but what this is like, this is a timeline of sort of like some key developments in enabling code to be used in computing environments, right? And so there's a lot of stuff here, but I think the key thing to look at is that little cluster of three things at the end. And what that is, so that's in the last year. What that is that all the major OEMs, so like we're talking about Apple, Microsoft, Google, they finally implemented stuff into the operating system to properly display encode onto the screen. And this is kind of important, right? Up until then, because encode's like a connected right to left script with diacritic attachments, like it requires a little more processing up front before it gets rendered, unlike kind of our Latin font. So that's kind of until those issues were resolved, you really didn't get a reliable kind of and an example of that is in Mark's web page. You saw that that headline that was all broken up. That's what happens if it's not being rendered properly. So this is kind of key. We're now sitting at the foundation of cell phones, really being able, and computing environment, really being able to render your code properly. And it's been a long journey, right? You can see all the way back in 2006. That's when code got added to the Unicode, encoded in Unicode. So it's been 10 years before this has really kind of been able to happen. But what's, really fonts, right? So we're here to talk about what does that mean, right? So here's another kind of mock-up similar to the ones Mark showed, but this is what it looks like on a cell phone. So on the left, this is a real web page on cell phone rendering with code with system font. And then we made this mock-up on the right. And, you can clearly see how just easier it is to consume the information in our mock-up. And, we get that, there's some cleanup of the layout, but fundamentally, we're seeing the benefits of having visual hierarchy created by styles and weights, our design, just our nature of our design being a little softer. It's a little more accommodating to, read. It's easier on the eyes. The system font on the left, you can see it's just that harsh angular geometry and stuff, and it's tightly spaced. And, a large amount of text that can become kind of difficult to read. So, here we are. We have a type family that really works pretty well on mobile environments. In what we're saying is a place where we expect a lot of people to come on, consume content and code.
Neil, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So on the current situation with the system font, does it only have 2 weights? Is that what?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. On the mobile phone, it actually only has 1 weight. So that one's there's just a higher point size. There's on the headline. So that is part of it. Yeah. When when system fonts are released, a lot of times for minority scripts, they don't really build a whole set of fonts, right? They just really get something functional, and it's important. You need something functional to get it available on the screen, but it doesn't really give you a lot of typographic diversity. And
on those websites that I showed earlier, there weren't more than 2 weights.
Right.
It's usually very. Yeah, it's usually very limited, and
yeah, the most we've ever seen is 2 weights, and I think that's on Windows. Everything else is a single weight. So yeah, you don't get a lot, right? And so it's kind of what's needed, right? And you could expect, like on the rigorous environment I think we're all familiar with on a phone with the small point sizes and the smaller screens, it really helps to have really good typography. So, that's where we're going, but as Mark and I are kind of looking at, what's going to really hold up, code from being able to take off, on cell phones. I mean, there's a number of challenges about getting fonts installed on phones, and that's a whole separate issue. But we thought, we kind of stepped way back out and said, what's fundamentally missing, right? There's something still wrong for adoption rates to go up. And that thing, it ends up being input methods. So as much as Apple and Google and Microsoft, they've gone and made it so that you can actually render the text properly on the screen. None of them ship with any native keyboard, right? There's no keyboard on the phone where you can actually type messages to one another, use Facebook or Twitter. So you have this passive device to consume information that someone hopefully has already created, but it's very difficult to create new content. And so when we're looking at if OEMs, the Microsofts and the Apples, that they're being slow to kind of natively support and go in their system, in their environment, by not providing a keyboard, they've basically added more weight because you're taking this wait and see approach. But if you're not going to have high adoption if people aren't interacting in that language. So you can see that sort of conundrum, and it really kind of got us thinking, is this something that we need to consider maybe tackling, right? This is, it's a little bit out of our scope, but it's might something we want to look at. So before we go and commit to that, we want to see if someone else had already done this. So we kind of started looking around for third-party keyboards, and you can see here's one from Android that was out there, and there was a solution, but it's not a particularly good solution. You can see here, I mean, this key layout is incredibly arbitrary. It's just they took the letters and stuck them on the screen. It's evident here, right? So you can see here's some diacritics that get used, but not very frequently. But they end up using really valuable real estate on the main screen. So it's not really well considered. Another thing is there's this dictionary function that's installed, like a predictive dictionary, but it doesn't actually work. It just, you know, whatever you type just in there, but there's no actual words in it. And then just like aesthetic, but sort of important things, right? And Go is a right to left script, but they have these delete and return buttons that face the wrong direction for it. So it's not really ever like meant to be considered, not a considered solution to the problem. It's just sort of something that was put together rather hastily. But the only sort of redeeming kind of quality to this entire keyboard is the fact that you can change the background image, and you can get yourself a little cat pic in there, which is kind of nice. But you know, that's about it. I mean, and that cat looks sad, I think, for a good reason. It's not a great keyboard. So iOS. So we looked at iOS as well, and there was there are no third-party keyboards available at all. What they did have though is this solution that came out well. So you know, that showed all the stuff they had fixed for rendering in the past year. This solution came out before that, so it wasn't really rendering text properly, but it was so it's not really a native keyboard. It worked within itself, and it was a way to kind of share this text as images, which is kind of clever. But the main thing is that this key layout is incredibly complicated. It's not really intuitive, and therefore not really necessarily a great experience, user experience. So, you know, after reviewing all of this, we kind of decided, like, yeah, I think this is something we need to tackle. Let's go ahead and figure out how to make a keyboard for a cell phone, because I think that's just a kind of a meaningful way to deploy this type family, or at least start to create a meaningful way to deploy this type family into cell phones. So, you know, after some deliberation, we actually decided to start with iOS, and that's a little counterintuitive. I think the vast majority of cell phones sold or the smartphones sold in West Africa are Android based. So it's not really, you would think, the first choice, but it's not really the first choice. But what it is actually is that the scripts authorities that we have been working with all along, they actually all use iPhones, and they're generally, you know, in the diaspora. You know, some are on continent still, but a lot of them aren't, and they are all using iPhones. And that's so not only, you know, they're like driving the literacy movement, but they're also like creating a lot of content that's online. So there's kind of twofold. If we created an iOS keyboard first, we would not only give them a tool that they can use to generate content, but we'd also have, you know, real beta testers, which is really important when you're going on, you know, to develop something like this. So, but how's that really work? You know, Mark and I are not app developers at all. You know, if we were, ideally, you know, we can get in one of those pods, hook up into the matrix, and wake up knowing how to program. But we didn't have that option. But what we do have is kind of the poor man way, which is this. This is what my computer has going on at any given time now. So I taught myself to develop in Swift for iOS development. And what that involves generally is probably about 30 to 40 tabs open in 2 or 3 browsers simultaneously all the time, with examples, tutorials, and documentation, and all these things that I'm just constantly digesting as I'm figuring out what I'm doing.
Neil is the man of 1,000 tabs.
It looks like it.
It's a little comical. You know, my computer's always like almost on fire because there's so much stuff going on. And then, you know, it's funny. I just saw this headline on the Onion yesterday, so I thought I'd throw it in here. But it's you know, accidentally closing browser window with 23 tabs presents rich chance at new life, and that is like my reality, because, you know, I won't even upgrade the browser because I'm afraid of losing all these things I have going on. But anyway, so, you know, what would a JamraPatel iOS keyboard look like? And, you know, pretty simple, right? We wanted to do the things the keyboards we saw on Android weren't doing, right? You know, it had to be considered. We wanted to have an OEM-like look and feel. You wanted the user experience to be like efficient and reliable and predictable, because, you know, if keyboard isn't really working well and it's not enjoyable to use, then people won't use it, which just defeats the whole purpose. And a thing to note before I kind of show you some of the features of this is that, you know, iOS is, for those who don't know, it's kind of this thing. You don't really create a keyboard and then stick it on the phone. What you actually would do is you create an app, just like a normal standalone app, and it has a thing called a keyboard extension that you would develop to use. But in this sort of funny way, you can actually backdoor it into this. So by doing that, then we can get Unco Keyboard available to be used in any app that's on the phone, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of what we had to go do. So here's kind of look at some of the screenshots of what was happening when we were doing the development of the keyboard. Now, we're incredibly fortunate. Our script authorities provided us with a key layout, an initial key layout, what key should go where. They, obviously because of their own understanding of the language, which we didn't quite, have that in-depth kind of knowledge on. So we have to build that from scratch. But we spent a lot of energy really kind of fine-tuning the user interface and doing that design work. Key sizes, what would be appropriate, just kind of little details about how shadows behave, when the pop-up windows work, how that's all going to function, and then all that, everything gets tested, on actual devices to make sure the performance is good enough to be an enjoyable experience. And so, while we're working on this and fine-tuning all those user design experience elements, we were getting requests to add more and more keys. Things that, like, when Mark and I first saw it, like, wow, that's some stuff, like I've never pressed the copyright thing on my phone ever, right? But it makes sense, right? If you're going to use the keyboard on a cell phone to generate, and that might be your primary means for generating content, it's useful to have as much of even some of the rare used things, but anything you might want to be able to use to generate. Yeah, sorry. If you want to be able to generate content, you might need some of the rare things, and even they're not common. So here's kind of look what we ended up with for layout. And so we ended up with getting everything onto 3 screens. The stuff you get that used most frequently is on the main screen. Things that get used less frequently on the second screen, and then you can see on the bottom that's all the extra mathematical symbols and a few other things. And we did it in a way where you kind of minimize the number of screen changes, right? And we always think that's the efficiency part of it, right? Like if you're messing around with like mathematical operators, you don't have to switch screens back to get to the numbers. They're also there on the same screen. We also made it so you don't have to sequentially go through one of these screens to get to the other screen. I think anyone's used iOS is familiar with that. It can be kind of annoying. So this is where we ended up. This is our layout. But we need down the path of making sure we have it as functional as possible. We added this other thing. So long press functionality is something you're probably also familiar with. But it's kind of a little video kind of showing how it goes. But so things like diacritics, yeah, there's the lesser ones on the second screen, but you might not want to change screens to get to one. It's also a great way to get to like rarely used currency symbols and punctuation. So again, this is sort of fitting into our design paradigm. And as we kind of got to this stage, and we're like, oh wow, this thing's pretty good. I think it's working. We tested a lot. The beta testers are approve of the design and functionality. And then we got sort of requests like, oh, it'd be awesome if it had a predictive dictionary too. And I'm like, oh yeah, But yes, it's super good idea, right? Again, because if you're anyone's typed a long email on a phone, it's pretty obnoxious to type every letter, right? So it makes sense to be able to have that dictionary. We were provided with 60,000 word dictionary to incorporate into the keyboard, and so after another 100 tabs in my browser, I figured out exactly how to do that, and then went ahead and implemented that. And here's a sort of little watching that go. So you type, and as you start to get some letters in there, you start to get recommendations of what you might be typing. So that's the keyboard itself. That's the entire thing. That's how it functions. Now, I mentioned that we needed to have a container app, like a basic app that the keyboard lives inside of. So this is kind of what I'm going to look at here. And right away after developing this, Mark and I realized that because it's only Android 6 and iOS 9 that really render Go properly, right? And so we kind of figured that not all phones are going to be updated to the latest operating system, which means if you're on, and it's notorious, Android's notorious for this, right? Like depending on your manufacturer, they may never update the operating system at all. So you could be sending a message from from your iOS phone that does, that renders it properly, and then, send a message to someone on an older Android phone, and they don't see anything, right? They just get a bunch of. We said we needed to kind of maybe put in utility to solve that problem, and that's what this is. So inside our app, we have this kind of sharing thing, and what it basically is, it's a text field which you can edit and enter your own text into, and then you can see there's like a little character counter in code in case you're trying to share something to Twitter, so you have that kind of going, counting it constantly. But let's say we want to take this message and send it off to Facebook. You go hit that share button on top, you get this kind of thing, which iOS users might be familiar with, and you say, yeah, let's go send this to Facebook, and then you get some more options you can choose if you wanted. But we'll go ahead and publish that, and this is what you get in Facebook. So we send two things. We send the text and we send an image of the text. So on the top is the text. So if you had this message you received, you see an update from me, I guess, on Facebook, and you go to look at it. If you're on an old Android phone or old iPhone, you wouldn't see that text at the top. It would just be, what they call tofu, those rectangles with X's in it, just sort of nonsense. But you would get this image attachment, and so you would still be able to read the message. So, yeah, you're on the older phone, you may not be able to reply back, but at least you can see the messages, which we thought was kind of an important sort of stopgap. So that's the app in and of itself. And we finished that in June of this year. June, yeah. And it's been out there on the App Store under the Manding name, Go 7th and Walla. And it's getting downloaded. As expected, it's more popular amongst the diaspora, and so it has been interesting to see, where the app is being downloaded in a lot of different countries, all over the world, which is pretty exciting. But we didn't want to stop there, right? We want to keep building utilities, and so after this, we went ahead and said, let's make a calculator, and we made this calculator. This is an Android. And so we changed new language. Yeah. So, another 100 tabs, and learned to program in this and for this, and an early version of the calculator. You can see very Android-like. We kind of have different colors and way it functions. Here's sort of the newest version of it. I'm just going to sort of play this video, watch it go. Yeah, so it's like normally you kind of plug away your calculations. This is using the numerals. And then and it's kind of live calculating on the bottom there, just like Android. We added this interesting feature here. So you can toggle back and forth between the Latin numerals and Go, which is kind of interesting. So the calculation is exactly the same. You can it's basically just swapping, you're just changing out the character set in a lot of ways. So we thought that was kind of an interesting feature. If maybe you're doing some calculations, or you're maybe communicating with someone that can't read the Go numerals, you can with the Latin, that'd be kind of a useful feature. But it's also maybe like an interesting way to learn, your Go numerals, because you can toggle back and forth and see how things work. So that's what we have done so far. So that's what's out there right now. We're actually kind of working on a few more things. There's a keyboard for Android that's forthcoming. There's a bunch of upgrades to this calculator that are also kind of forthcoming. So, this is kind of a constant thing. But we feel like, it's kind of it's a bit of an experiment, right? This isn't really type design, but, as Mark was saying, you make these things to enrich, communities that don't have quite the same typographic diversity that we benefit from. And obviously the OEMs are going to be slow to come on board, but we feel like by making these apps and putting them out there and increasing a user base, we'll encourage people to want to localize their apps and Go, and then ultimately build a stronger case for OEMs to want to deeply support and code themselves. So it's kind of a slow building process, but I think a pretty exciting one. And that is what I have to show.
There's the bird. Yay.
There's the bird. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, Mike. I'm glad that you guys are doing this.
Yeah,
definitely.
great.
I'm going to close that screen and then we'll take a look at you guys. Yay. So thank you. There's a lot of chat that was happening actually while you're talking.
Okay.
We missed it all.
We missed it all.
Yeah, but you can see on the right-hand side, right, now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So you can always scroll back as well. Let's see. So Mustafa was asking for a font of your Enco sources, and so David had shared one of their links. And then
He's found
Coleman.
the keyboard.
Oh.
We have, we developed some keyboards for computers, for laptops as well.
Oh,
So
right.
he's
Just
found
sort of soft key. Yeah. To replace the
and
keys.
you can download those
Cool.
for Mac and Windows.
And then Coleman was mentioning, Coleman from Philly said, Baba Mahdi Diane from Cairo
Yeah.
was responsible for a large part of the DOS font in Enco. Okay, so you're reading that. Coleman also mentioned that he had that still on his phone, and that Tony also had that photo solution previously.
Yeah, right. That's actually where the idea came from.
It's a great idea.
Baba Maladi Jane is also responsible for generating a lot of, or for generating a lot of content, which is really important in Manding, in the Enco script, and also for I think digitizing or bringing into a digital form a lot of Suna Manakante's writings as well. And that's an important thing, really, is if you're going to if you put a writing system out there and you want it to have some kind of success or to be able to last, because people have done this before and the writing systems just sort of died away, you have to generate content. And so I think Conte knew that right off the bat. He just went crazy and just created all kinds of content in the sciences, in the humanities, in literature. And so there's a lot of content out there that's serving to propagate the writing system.
But it's actually kind of an interesting segue to where we are now, right? It's this question about, what needs to happen now. And I think, we're building tools to help, you build a typeface, we demonstrated that it can do kind of a good job on screen, and some tools to help kind of improve, propagate more usage on phones. But yeah, now it's like we really just need like tons of internet content of all kinds of great stuff. And that'd be, because that makes the whole thing feed on itself, right? If there's content and there's more people that want to use it, and then there's more apps and tools that'll be localized that will facilitate generating more content. It's this kind of cycle, and I think that's kind of the exciting thing that we're looking forward to, hopefully kind of seeing that kind of snowball, because I think that's a big step.
That's great. Okay, so we have tons of questions that came in, so I'm just going to go through this list, if that's okay. We'll start at the top. Richard had asked, if there are Latin characters, to what length do you go to match the look of the African to the Latin?
Well, as far as we can go, really. Sometimes that's easier, depending on the writing system, on the script. That's easier than in other cases. For example, the Enco, because it had the stroke contrast, once it gets bolder, it's a little bit easier to coordinate the color. What we're always trying to go for, I think the main thing that we're trying to go for, is the same color, regardless of what the script allows us to do, so that they can be used in bilingual or multilingual contexts. And but sometimes you run into something like the bisyllabary, which historically we've never been able to, when we look at all that we've found as many historical examples as we can of it, and it's always sort of remained a monoweight. So so that means, designing say the bold, giving the stroke weight of the bold, making that a little bit lighter than you do in the Latin, so that in the end what comes out is something that color-wise in a text has the same color, has the same weight, that kind of thing. We're trying to coordinate them visually. And then of course a lot of other elements a lot of other thought goes into, is it generally a soft round form? Is it a hard angular form? And these can generally, as we found out, be translated from one writing system into another to some extent or another.
Right. It's not like a literal, this curve is going to be the same shape.
Right.
You still hold true to kind of the ductus of that form, but you're saying, in general, it's going to have the same kind of softness, or, the same kind of speed going around the curve. Or
that makes sense. Yeah, you still have to retain the readability of the form. You can't change it so much that it distorts.
Yeah. Right. And we don't want to deviate from what's it's true to. You know what I mean? You don't want to impose a sort of an aesthetic that's maybe not expected to be seen on a form that, like that would just be, I mean, this happens a lot. We try to avoid that kind of thing.
Makes sense. Great. Thank you. Hope that helps, Richard. Let's see. Richard has another one. Even though the font's main target is an African language, does the font have Latin characters as well?
Yes, it does. The Latin IPA. That's the answer to that question, because the IPA is so important for transcribing so many languages on the African continent. So it really does have to have the Latin complement in there as well.
Jason commented on that. Don't all fonts have to have the basic ASCII character set to function? Right?
We saw that before, and we were thinking, is that true?
Yeah,
that's true, isn't it? That's it's one of those things.
It
like,
might be.
Yeah.
I mean, we always have some in there, so I never really think about it. You probably do need to have that filled out.
I believe we've experienced that where we've exported a font that didn't have that and just didn't work.
It kind of freaks out.
So it sounds familiar. I think that's true. Yeah.
Okay. Grant has a question. Since you're a fan of invented scripts, what do you think about reforming existing ones?
That is such a Hrant question.
Thanks, Hrant.
Yeah. Hi, Hrant. Let's see.
You mean like willfully
reforming
them, or like letting it sort of its own evolution sort of take it into a new place?
Like,
the latter.
The first one.
The first one. Okay. Because the latter, I feel like happens.
Is this
automatically?
Is he referring to a total reform, like a George Bernard Shaw kind of thing, or like Cyrillic, an aggressive tweaking of what's there now?
I don't know. Can you see the chat? He's making
we have to scroll down here.
On the right. Yeah. Not Darwinian is what he's saying.
Not Darwinian. Oh.
It's on the right-hand side. Which do you prefer?
I haven't really thought about that.
Yeah.
That's why, Hrant thinks about things like that often.
I mean, it's always interesting. I guess it always comes down to a question of to what end or for what purpose.
Why would you do it?
Right. And if people are interested or fascinated or is accepting or is there's technological reason to kind of manipulate it for everyone's benefit, then sure, I guess it's interesting thing to go do. If it's
nothing in Latin that you want to fix.
Nothing in Latin, there's sure, but
we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Right, exactly.
We don't want to hurt any letters' feelings.
Okay, Hannah, I hope that helps. We're gonna move on to the next one. Okay, so Bernardo from Philly says, you talk more about adding italics to non-Latin scripts. You mentioned adding typographic richness, but italics aren't inherent in these type cultures.
That's true. For example, in the and we've experienced this in Ethiopia, in the DEs, we specifically asked one of our authorities there, is this something we should be looking at? And he kind of made it clear that italics would probably be pretty much ignored within Ethiopia and Eritrea, that they probably wouldn't be used. They're used to sort of electronically slanting the upright version if needed, but even that's rarely done. So it's not, it doesn't always translate into, I don't think we've ever seen any italic for the vi syllabary either.
No, I mean, there is one, how much it gets used or needs to be used.
Yeah,
if it doesn't have a meaning, typographically, then it's sort of really just a stylistic thing. And we wouldn't necessarily just go ahead and do that. If it really has like some sort of value as in the typography, and in the case of in code, we had seen aspects of where it could get used, and I think that worked well there.
in the Cherokee, for example, in Fourier's Cherokee, that has a cursive italic in it, but that was already present in the form of handwriting. So it seemed like that might be an interesting, usable thing for them. And when I approached the Cherokee Nation with the idea of an italic, they were intrigued by it, and then they accepted it. They thought it was something that they could use, because it had been there since the invention of the script in handwriting, and since a lot of italics in the Latin script are based on a more cursive model anyway, it seemed like a practical thing to do.
So there's a couple of questions here. So which way is it slant? It slants towards the left, which would make sense for a right to left script. Coleman's thing of that he hasn't seen a lot of examples in old manuscripts. Yeah, it's funny. We see more of it because of the use online, actually. There might be some stylistic thing. Sometimes headlines like use kind of an more italic looking typeface, but it's not really typeface. A lot of times hand lettered, and just some sort of manuscripts we've seen.
In handwritten manuscripts, not sort of in handwriting, but we've seen italics used in things like newspapers, where they're hand drawn. They're hand, and a lot of newspapers or documents that you would find in public often have very creative. In fact, I think one of our slides showed one of them has very creative forms when it comes to, say, the header, and then things like headlines and the like will be hand drawn. And those can be very creative too, but they lean to the left. And that's really that's the first place I remember seeing them for the first time.
I mean, there's like kind of a bigger question or observation, which is like, you talk about the rules of typography sort of develop over a long period of time, and there's a lot of cultural reasons for it and things and communication needs and wrapped up in it. You're talking about a younger script, there's some rules to the typography of it, but I'm sure, but they're developing at the same time, right? As the adoption goes up and then the medium is changing, it's a little bit of a live process. So maybe italics may not be used before, but in sort of responding to how things get communicated on in web content, there might be we're seeing maybe there's more of a need to want to have it as an option. So I think it'll evolve over time.
Great. Bernardo, I hope that helps. I know you're still getting some comments here in the chat. So.
Coleman.
Okay, so ignore Coleman. That's okay. We love it. No, Coleman, this is awesome. Just keep putting it in. Yeah, no, we love it. It's great.
We had a Skype conversation with Coleman, and it was very enlightening. He could really, because he's been boots on the ground in the the Manding speaking region a number of times, and so he could really he helped us a lot to understand some of the like social constructs and currents and things that go on there that really really helps you to sort of understand what's going on there. So that's okay. We're not ignoring you, Colin.
No, and that's very helpful, actually. Okay, so Richard has another question that was voted up twice. What's the relationship of these scripts to Unicode?
The relation of these scripts to Unicode.
Meaning, they're all encoded, if that's what you mean.
They're all, yes, they all have Unicode code points.
Okay.
Is that what you meant?
Richard, if you have any other explanation for the question. Oh, all characters is saying.
Colin says he's an unemployed doctoral candidate.
All the characters have
Unicode points.
Yes, that's true. They do.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's some interesting things like in code. There's a couple of punctuation glyphs that are used they're actually from the Arabic, code range, the question mark and the comma. So it's just a little different than I think I don't know how common that is across a lot of non-Latin scripts, but that's kind of maybe a little unique. But all the necessary characters are encoded.
Okay, good. So you've got those code points? He's asking.
Yeah, so you've got, yeah.
So you have to. Is that you have to use those code? Oh,
I
wait a
see.
minute. Richard,
Yes.
what are you saying?
You got the.
Please explain.
No, we do use all those code points, and you have to use them. Yeah, you're not like reappropriating code points, if that's the question. Oh, I see for the Arabic.
Okay.
Yes, yes, we do. Right. Yes, 060C and 061F or whatever. Yeah, we'd use those actual code points.
Great, excellent. Yay, we came out clear.
Notice how he knew those numbers immediately. You know, they're on a browser tab somewhere. You know?
And guys, I hope you don't mind. We're going over a little bit, but there's more questions coming in. Are you guys okay with that?
We're okay, sure.
Good. Let's see here. So Mustafa has a question. Hi, we asked to add encode to Google Translation, but since now we don't have any answer, have you any idea? By the way, we have more volunteers to contribute to the translation to English and French.
That was an earlier question.
That was okay.
Yeah.
That's to improve the English to French. That's good because we've used Google Translate quite a bit in talking to a number of our contacts in West Africa. We're both not. You couldn't say either of us are fluent in French by any stretch of the imagination, and I just marvel at the fact that there's something like Google Translate out there to enable this kind of thing to happen. That being said, however, you don't just use Google Translate. You work it. You learn how to work it. So that because if you don't, you could end up saying things that are really embarrassing. And there's a couple of amusing stories there too, but we won't go into that right now. But fortunately, you know, we know enough rudimentary French to be able to catch the big slip-ups that Google Translate does. But it certainly has been beneficial to this project. Is
the question though about translating between code into French or English?
We don't know if we're not in contact with that arm of Google. Well, I couldn't really say. I don't know.
They historically, I don't think, move very quickly with the scripts that are not the majority, or languages that are not like big major languages. I don't know what's involved in the process of actually programming a translating engine, so I have no idea. But yeah, we're not really super hooked up into that.
We'll set up a petition.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
That's what it would be so beneficial.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Okay, I'll finish answering that one. And then Richard asks, when you say you're doing an italic version of each, italic meaning slanted, I suppose. Is the first oblique version is this the first oblique version that's ever been released for these scripts?
For Nko, yes, and it's not strictly an oblique. There is some variance in some of the glyphs in it that we thought would be okay, and we looked at, say, Conte's writing and some other forms of handwriting to the inspiration for that kind of thing. But we didn't want to go too far off. We never really saw any historical precedent for a totally cursive form or something like that. Yeah. So, but we did. They're not. It's the italic is not exactly an oblique, but it's close.
Right. It's like it's not a true italic, but it's not just slanted over. They're definitely drawn to
combination.
Yeah, it's a combo. To get a little bit of the flow that would make sense if you were actually writing in a slanted way.
As Richard said, it says a balancing act.
Yes,
that's exactly.
Answering your own question, Richard.
Balancing.
Great, thank you. Colin has a question here. Curious how you handle a predictive dictionary typing, given the tonal diacritics. Can you type without any diacritics and be given the range of possible entries with diacritic markings?
The way it is now, it is incorporating that. It is accounting for the diacritics. So it's looking at the stream of text. So if you get, the vowel, and then you get when you put the first vowel, it starts to show you results that may have any one of those diacritics, depending on how they are ordered. But then if you get to, once he's thrown a diacritic, it sort of, that becomes the starting point for all the next predictions. You probably could get a lot more complex in sort of really kind of looking for all the potential options going out from, including, so if you type a vowel with a low tone, then you won't be prompted with the option to correct. That's the way it is right now. Right. Once you get the tone in, but prior to the tone, you could get both options.
Okay. And Coleman, you have another question here. How are your efforts with Latin IPA fonts distinct from those of SIL, like, now I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but Duluth SIL and Charis SIL? Is that correct?
Oh, these are the fonts that they must have.
Ah, that's the name of the fonts. Okay.
How are your efforts distinct from those? We're not entirely sure.
Yeah, I actually haven't looked at those.
Although we, I think it would.
I just mean they have
IP fonts to type a range of IPA characters.
Well, it's this. It's part of it's the pairing, right? I mean, it's more than just, you know, just a character set, right? We have those characters included in our IPA. You know, we try to have the end goal is to have the full coverage, certainly to service as many, you know, African languages as possible. But from a design perspective, it's, you know, it's meant to have that visual pairing. But from a functional perspective, it should have will ultimately have the same character set, if that's what you're asking.
As well as all the weight variations and the weighted italics as well. So it should be just as complete as anything else that we're doing in the system. Does that answer the question?
He says, I see it's primarily design.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So this is going to be the last question we'll answer.
Okay.
And of course, it's from Grant. How can we get more African languages to go custom script to forestall assimilation?
Custom to forestall. Got it. How can we get more? That comes from within the community. I don't know if there's anything we can do. That comes from within the language community.
Yeah. I mean, right. I think what's been effective with the scripts, the newer scripts that have gotten a lot of traction is the grassroots effort of it. You know, how much, you know, people teaching each other and propagating it. And so, I don't know, maybe when there's enough examples of it out there and people get pretty excited about it, then maybe it takes off. But you have to have that need. And I think, you know, what we've seen, there's also another script, Adlam, but in code, same thing. The need is the lack of tonal representation or sound representation, and the forcing it into Latin or into another script is sort of just ends up being problematic. So that's generally the biggest impetus, is like, no, we just need a cleaner, easier, more reliable way to represent the language. Yeah.
Right. Grant's asking, what about promoting ENCO throughout Africa?
That's and Coleman says ENCO.
Right.
Active very engaged.
Right.
Yes.
I think there's some allowances within the script right now to actually support a number of other languages that aren't necessarily part of the same language family. Whether that, you know, other communities would want to adopt it or not,
It's up to them.
I think Coleman would probably know that better.
Coleman is answering this question better than we are in the chat window right now.
Thank you, Coleman, for supporting this.
Yeah, this is
right, exactly. So like Wolof is, you know, heavily uses a Jami. Yeah. So there's, I think, you know, it runs the thing that Mark was sort of suggesting, that there is a part of it, it's cultural identity. And so,
yes,
you know, that may in and of itself be the barrier, you know, or could be a barrier.
Right.
Okay.
If that's a critical part of the cultural identity of Manding speakers, then maybe somebody who speaks another language may not, or from another language group may not be as inclined to join that group, so to speak. You know, it's hard to say. It's complicated as usual. It's incredibly complicated.
Yeah, Grant just finishes with cultural preservation as a universal tradition. Yep, it is, definitely. I mean, it's for all cultures, actually.
Yeah.
I want to wrap it up, guys, because we're a little bit over, but it's so,
Okay.
this is an amazing group. I'm very, very engaged.
It's great. We've got linguists, we've got type designers in the chat bar, we've got everything.
Designers. It's really great.
It's really great. Yeah.
It is great. And thank you so much for not only what you guys do, but also sharing it with us. Appreciate it.
It was our pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Oh, thank you, Coleman. I'm assuming that's not a comment about me.
Yeah, it's not showing up.
I think it is. All right.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll have a good day. And we'll talk to you again soon. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for everyone participating.
Thanks for the great questions.
Okay. Have a good day.
Take care.